At 35,000 feet, the cabin went so quiet, Elena could hear the ice shift inside the crystal bucket. Adrian Volkov didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He slid a thick contract across the glossy table, tapped the signature line with one finger, and looked at the woman trembling beside him in a red dress that wasn't allowed on any legitimate flight. "Sign it," he said. The mistress glanced at the page like it was written in code. "Adrian, I don't understand." "That's why she's here." Adrian's eyes cut to Elena. "My flight attendant. She has that cute little accent. Tell my guest what she's agreeing to." Elena held her service tray perfectly level, even though her pulse had turned slow and sharp, because she'd already read the first paragraph. And if Adrian signed this, he wouldn't just be cheating on his pregnant wife. He would be confessing to a federal crime, in ink, on his own aircraft, with his own security watching. Adrian leaned back, relaxed. "Go on, translate it. In your best, whatever you are." A guard smirked. Another man lifted his phone, ready to record. Elena's throat went dry. Not from fear, from the timing. Because the light above the cockpit door had just flickered twice, an old signal she hadn't seen in years. Someone had breached the jet's internal comms. And down on the ground, 7 months pregnant and alone in a penthouse, Katerina Volkov was either about to be saved or erased. Elena looked at the contract again. Then she looked at Adrian, and she smiled. "Of course, sir," she said softly. "I'll translate." 6 hours earlier, Elena Morales had been scrubbing lipstick off a coffee cup in the executive lounge at Vanterre Airport when her supervisor grabbed her wrist. "VIP charter," he hissed. "Private jet. High tip. No mistakes." Elena didn't ask whose jet. She didn't have to. When the word Volkov floated through any luxury space in the city, people stopped breathing like the air itself belonged to him. Elena changed into her flight uniform, navy dress, hair pinned clean, a face that said polite and forgettable. The kind of woman powerful men didn't bother remembering. That was the point. She boarded the jet last, after the security sweep, after the catering crates, after the briefcase handoff she pretended not to notice. A matte black Gulfstream with gold stitching in the seats and a bedroom bigger than Elena's apartment. 2 bodyguards already inside, both armed, both bored. Elena walked past them with the calm of someone who had learned to survive by looking harmless. Then Adrian Volkov stepped in. No entourage, no rush, just presence. Mid-30s, perfect suit. The kind of face that could sell a company or end a life. His eyes scanned the cabin once, not looking for comfort, looking for control. He stopped when he saw Elena, not because she was pretty, because she didn't flinch. Most people did, even if they tried to hide it. Adrian's mouth twitched, almost amused. "You're the new one," he said. Elena kept her gaze respectful, not submissive. "I'm assigned to this charter, sir." He studied her like a document. "Accent," he said. "Where from?" Elena chose her answer carefully. "Not from here." One of the guards chuckled. "That means she can't answer." Elena smiled slightly, like she'd heard worse. Adrian didn't smile back, but he remembered her. That was mistake number 1. They took off at sunset. The plane climbed through a ribbon of cloud, city lights shrinking into something harmless. At cruising altitude, Adrian's phone lit up across the aisle. A name flashed on the screen, Katerina. Elena saw it by accident, just a reflection on the polished wood. 3 missed calls. Adrian ignored all of them. Then he made another call, voice low, turned away. "Yeah," he said. "I told her I'm meeting investors. She'll believe whatever I say." He paused, listening, then added, "She's pregnant, not stupid." Elena's fingers tightened around the linen napkins. Pregnant. She'd heard the rumors. Everyone had. Katerina Volkov, the untouchable wife, hidden away since the baby announcement. The woman people described like a ghost. Elegant, quiet, expensive, impossible to read. Elena had never met her. But she'd seen one thing other people missed. Every time Katerina's name appeared on Adrian's phone, his jaw tightened a fraction. Not guilt, irritation. Like she was an unfinished problem. An hour into the flight, the mistress arrived. She boarded during a discreet refuel stop, heels clicking on the stairway, perfume flooding the cabin, laughter too loud for a plane full of armed men. Adrian didn't stand to greet her. He didn't need to. She climbed into his lap like she belonged there. Elena kept serving champagne like she hadn't noticed the red marks on the woman's neck, or the way the guards looked away to give them privacy they didn't deserve. She moved through the cabin with smooth precision, listening without appearing to listen. That was how Elena survived. That was also how she heard the first real detail. Adrian's associate, a clean-cut man with a lawyer's haircut, opened a folder and said, "The transfer clears tonight. Once the signatures are done, the accounts won't be traceable." Adrian's reply was casual. "Good. I want it finished before my wife wakes up." The mistress giggled. "She's asleep this early?" Adrian didn't answer. He reached into his bag and pulled out a velvet jewelry box. The woman squealed. The guards smirked. The lawyer looked relieved, like gifts were easier than paperwork. Elena watched the box open. Diamonds. Cold and perfect. Not a romantic gesture. A leash. Then Adrian did something that made Elena's blood cool. He pulled out a second item, thicker than the jewelry box, wrapped in a black folder. A contract. He placed it on the table with the ease of a man placing a weapon down in front of someone weaker. "Sign," he told the mistress. She hesitated. "What is it?" Adrian's eyes flicked to Elena. A slow, deliberate glance that said he hadn't forgotten her accent. Or her calm. "That's why you're on my plane," he said to Elena, like she was equipment. "Translate it." Elena stepped closer, tray still in hand. She didn't touch the paper yet, but she saw enough. A paragraph labeled Disclosure. A section referencing offshore transfers. A clause that read like a trap. And at the bottom, a blank line where Adrian Volkov expected someone to sign away their soul. Then the cockpit light flickered twice. Elena's stomach tightened. Because that signal meant one thing. The plane had just been pinged by someone who wasn't supposed to be able to ping it. Adrian didn't notice. He was watching Elena, testing her, enjoying himself. "Translate," he repeated, "and do it in your best foreign thing." Elena finally set the tray down. She leaned in, eyes scanning the page like she was just a worker doing a job. Then she looked up at Adrian, calm as glass. "Of course, sir," she said. And in her head, she counted the seconds until the ground team would make their move. Elena picked up the contract with steady fingers. She let her eyes move across the page slowly, as if translating word by word. In reality, she didn't need to. The language was precise, legal, designed to look harmless. But buried inside were two lethal details. First, the woman signing it would accept compensation in exchange for silence regarding financial activities conducted during private air transit. Second, Adrian Volkov's own signature appeared at the bottom as guarantor, which meant if this document ever surfaced, it tied him directly to offshore transfers already under investigation. This wasn't a romantic NDA. It was a liability shield. And he was careless enough to execute it mid-flight. Elena glanced up. The mistress was chewing her lower lip, nervous but greedy. "How bad is it?" she whispered. Adrian smirked. "It says you're smart enough not to talk." Elena tilted her head slightly. "Would you like a literal translation, sir?" she asked softly. "Or a simplified one?" One of the guards chuckled. "Look at her, acting important." Adrian's eyes narrowed just slightly. "Literal," he said. "I like precision." The jet hummed around them, engines steady, altitude stable. The cockpit light remained dark now, but Elena knew what that earlier flicker meant. Someone had accessed the aircraft's external tracking grid. That wasn't random. That was coordinated. She returned her focus to the paper. In summary, she began calmly, the document states that the passenger acknowledges participation in financial discussions that may be subject to regulatory scrutiny. The mistress blinked. Regulatory what? Adrian's gaze sharpened. Elena continued smoothly. It confirms that in exchange for compensation, the passenger waives any right to disclose information regarding asset transfers conducted before, during, or after this flight. Silence. The lawyer at the end of the table shifted uncomfortably. That's overly dramatic wording, he muttered. Elena gave him a polite nod. I am translating exactly what is written. Adrian leaned back in his seat. And the guarantor clause? She met his eyes. It states that you personally validate the transfer and assume legal responsibility for the execution. The mistress slowly turned toward Adrian. Why would you assume responsibility? She asked. Adrian's jaw tightened for the first time. It's standard, he said flatly, to protect you. But Elena saw it, that flicker of irritation again. Because now the girl understood more than she was supposed to. The guards exchanged glances. The lawyer reached forward slightly. Perhaps we should move forward. The jet jolted, not violently, but enough. Champagne rippled in the glasses. The mistress grabbed Adrian's arm. What was that? The intercom crackled. Minor turbulence, the pilot's voice said, controlled, neutral. Elena didn't move. She knew the difference between turbulence and controlled airspace interference. And that wasn't weather. Adrian stood. He walked toward the cockpit without urgency, but the guards straightened immediately. Finish the explanation, he told Elena over his shoulder. The cabin door closed behind him. The moment he was out of sight, the lawyer leaned forward fast. Who are you? He hissed quietly. Elena's expression didn't change. A flight attendant. You translated too cleanly, he said. That wasn't broken English. She gave him a small smile. I practice. The mistress looked between them, confused. So, should I sign or not? The lawyer hesitated, because now it wasn't just about money. If she signed, she tied herself to something bigger. If she refused, she risked Adrian's temper. Before anyone could answer, the cockpit door opened again. Adrian stepped out. He didn't look angry. He looked focused. Change of route, he said. We're landing early. The lawyer blinked. That's not on schedule. It is now. He returned to his seat and looked directly at Elena. You, he said, stay. The guards and the others exchanged glances. Adrian gestured once. They moved toward the back of the jet, giving him privacy. The mistress remained seated, suddenly unsure. Elena stood still. Adrian leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. You translated accurately, he said. Too accurately. Elena kept her tone respectful. You asked for literal, sir. He studied her. Where did you learn legal language? There it was. The test. Elena didn't hesitate. My father handled contracts. Doing what? Import business. Not a lie, just incomplete. Adrian's eyes lingered on her face a second longer than necessary. You're wasted serving drinks. I'm employed, she corrected softly. A faint smile touched his mouth. Confidence amused him, but then his phone buzzed. He looked down. Unknown number. He answered without speaking. A voice on the other end said something short. Adrian's expression changed. Not fear. Recognition. He ended the call and placed the phone face down. We're not landing early, he said calmly. We're being redirected. The lawyer stiffened. By who? Adrian looked out the window into the darkness. By someone who thinks they can reach my wife. The air in the cabin tightened. The mistress whispered, What does that mean? Adrian ignored her. His eyes returned to Elena. Cold, assessing. You noticed the cockpit light earlier. It wasn't a question. Elena didn't react. I observed details, she said. He nodded once. Good. Then he said something that made the entire dynamic shift. If something happens tonight, Adrian said quietly, you're staying close to me. The lawyer protested immediately. That's unnecessary. Adrian raised one hand. Silence. She sees things, he said simply. Elena felt the weight of that. Recognition was dangerous, but proximity was more dangerous. The jet began descending. City lights appeared below like a field of broken stars. Adrian looked at the unsigned contract still on the table, then at the mistress. Sign it, he said calmly. She hesitated, and for the first time, Elena saw doubt overpower greed. The plane banked sharply, and in the distance, red and blue lights flashed on the runway. Not airport lights, emergency vehicles. Someone was waiting. The jet touched down too smoothly for an emergency landing. That was the first thing Elena noticed. No sirens screaming on the runway. No flashing barricades blocking the path. Just black SUVs positioned at a distance that looked official, but calculated. Adrian remained seated as the wheels met asphalt. He didn't rush to stand. He didn't panic. He watched. The mistress's hand trembled over the unsigned contract. Adrian, she whispered, what's happening? He didn't answer her. He looked at Elena instead. Open the champagne, he said quietly. The lawyer blinked. This is not the time. I decide the time. Elena moved automatically, retrieving the bottle. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as ground crews approached. Through the window, she saw uniformed officers. But the formation was wrong. Too loose, too comfortable. Not federal. Private security. Someone powerful had requested access. The jet door remained closed. No one knocked. Adrian finally stood. Bring the document, he told the lawyer. The man hesitated. Should we destroy it? Adrian's eyes sharpened. Did I ask you to think? The lawyer swallowed and grabbed the folder. Elena handed Adrian a glass of champagne. Their fingers brushed for half a second. He leaned in just enough for only her to hear. Tell me something, he murmured. If someone tried to use my wife against me, what would you predict? Elena didn't hesitate. You would retaliate publicly, she said softly, but respond privately. His gaze held hers. And you? He asked. What would you do? Elena's answer came steady. I would ask why someone believes your wife is your weakness. A pause. A fraction of a second where something shifted in his expression. Then, a sharp knock echoed through the aircraft door. 3 precise hits. Professional. Adrian nodded to one of the guards. The door opened. Cold air flooded in. A man in a dark overcoat stepped up the stairs. Not law enforcement. Not military. Corporate. Behind him, 2 more men remained near the SUVs. Mr. Volkov, the newcomer said calmly. Unexpected landing. Adrian smiled slightly. I enjoy surprises. The man stepped inside without invitation. Elena recognized him immediately. Not from tabloids, from financial briefings. Daniel Kessler, head of a multinational compliance consortium. A man who didn't move without data. Kessler's eyes swept the cabin. The mistress, the lawyer, the contract, and finally, Elena. He paused there half a second longer, then looked back at Adrian. You're difficult to reach these days, Kessler said. Adrian took a slow sip of champagne. I'm selective. Kessler nodded toward the folder in the lawyer's hands. I assume that's what I think it is. The lawyer stiffened. Adrian didn't deny it. Careful, he said. You're boarding my aircraft without invitation. Kessler smiled faintly. And you're transferring assets under observation. The temperature inside the jet seemed to drop. The mistress whispered, "Adrian." He didn't look at her. Elena stayed still, listening, calculating. Kessler continued evenly. "We both know you've been flagged. The ports, the offshore movement, the timing." Adrian tilted his head slightly. And, Kessler said, "your wife was contacted this morning." That did it. Not anger, not panic, but something darker. Adrian's hand tightened around the glass. "She was approached by someone claiming to represent your compliance division," Kessler added. "That wasn't me." Silence. The lawyer's face drained of color. Elena's pulse slowed again. Because this wasn't about tax evasion anymore. This was leverage. Adrian stepped closer to Kessler. "You're telling me someone is impersonating your authority to reach my pregnant wife?" "Yes." "And you thought boarding my plane was the correct response?" Kessler held his ground. "I thought you'd want to know before the next move happens." A beat. Then Adrian laughed softly, low, dangerous. "You assume she's vulnerable." Kessler didn't smile back. "I assume someone believes she is." The cabin felt smaller. The mistress looked like she wanted to disappear. Elena noticed something subtle. Adrian hadn't asked how Katerina responded. He hadn't asked what she said, which meant he already knew his wife wasn't fragile. Interesting. Adrian turned to Elena again. "Translate something for me," he said calmly. Kessler frowned. "What?" Adrian ignored him. He looked only at Elena. "In your foreign voice," he said quietly, "tell Mr. Kessler what happens to people who gamble with my family." It was a performance, a show of control. But Elena saw the subtext. He wanted to test whether she would escalate or moderate. She chose carefully. In smooth, composed cadence, she delivered the message in another language. Measured, controlled, not threatening, not dramatic. When she finished, she translated it back into English herself. "He says," she stated evenly, "that miscalculations are expensive." Kessler watched her now, really watched her. "You're not just serving drinks," he said quietly. Elena gave him a polite nod. "I serve what is requested." Adrian's eyes gleamed. Approval. Dangerous approval. Then, another knock. Harder this time. More urgent. One of the guards looked uneasy. Adrian nodded again. The door opened wider. This time, real federal agents stood on the stairs. Badges visible. Weapons holstered, but ready. The lead agent spoke firmly. "Adrian Volkov, we need to discuss unauthorized financial movement and aircraft redirection." The lawyer cursed under his breath. The mistress gasped. Kessler stepped aside slowly. Adrian remained calm. "Gentlemen," he said smoothly, "you're interrupting a private flight." The lead agent's eyes shifted to the contract on the table. "Then it's a good thing we arrived before signatures were finalized." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Elena realized something critical. This wasn't a random intervention. This was a collision. Three forces converging. Someone targeting Katerina. Kessler protecting his own interests. Federal agents chasing financial trails. And Adrian Volkov in the center. The only unpredictable variable? Her. Adrian looked at Elena one more time. And for the first time since takeoff, he looked unsure of something. No one moved. The federal agents stood at the entrance of the jet, controlled but alert. Not storming in, not drawing weapons. Waiting. Adrian Volkov didn't raise his voice. He didn't look at the badges. He looked at the contract. Then at the unsigned line. Then at Elena. The lead agent stepped forward one measured pace. "Mr. Volkov," he said evenly, This aircraft was redirected under emergency compliance protocol. Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I don't recognize your authority to redirect my aircraft," he replied. "You don't have to," the agent said calmly. "The airspace does." The lawyer finally stood. "This is unlawful interference with a private charter under sovereign registry." "Save it," the agent cut him off. "We're not here for debate." Kessler remained silent near the wall, observing. The mistress looked like she might faint. Elena remained still, but her mind was racing. This wasn't a raid. If it were, they would have boarded aggressively. This was leverage, a pause tactic, a signal. Adrian finally set his champagne glass down. "What exactly are you accusing me of?" he asked, voice smooth as polished steel. The agent glanced at the folder. "Unauthorized asset migration linked to a flagged network, and possible coercion of a witness." The word hung in the air. Witness. The mistress looked up sharply. "I didn't do anything." "No one said you did," the agent replied calmly. Adrian's gaze shifted slowly to Elena, deliberate, evaluating, because she had translated the document, which meant she understood its weight. The agent followed his line of sight. "And who is she?" he asked. Elena answered before Adrian could. "Cabin staff. Neutral tone, no tremor." The agent studied her. "Did you translate that contract?" "Yes, sir." "What did it state?" Adrian's voice cut in smoothly. "She is not legal counsel." The agent didn't look at him. "I asked her." The cabin felt compressed. Elena had three choices: minimize, deflect, or control the narrative. She chose the third. "It outlined compensation terms in exchange for non-disclosure of financial discussions," she said evenly. "It included a guarantor clause binding Mr. Volkov personally." The lawyer inhaled sharply. The mistress stared at her in shock. Adrian didn't blink. The agent nodded once. "Thank you." Then he turned back to Adrian. "Interesting timing, Mr. Volkov, especially considering your wife received a visit this morning." There it was again, Katerina. Adrian's composure shifted by a hair. "From who?" he asked quietly. The agent held his gaze. "Someone posing as a financial investigator, attempting to obtain confirmation of offshore holdings." Kessler spoke for the first time since the agents arrived. "That was not my division." "I know," the agent said. A beat. Then he added, "Which means someone is manufacturing pressure." The room went silent. Because now it wasn't just about money, it was about manipulation. Adrian stepped closer to the agents. "Are you implying this visit to my wife was staged to provoke me?" The agent didn't answer directly. "We're implying someone wants you reactive." Elena felt it click. The redirect, the fake compliance visit, the federal timing, the cockpit interference earlier. This wasn't one investigation, it was a layered strategy. Push Adrian, force him to move assets, catch him exposed. The mistress whispered, "Adrian, I don't understand any of this." He didn't look at her. He looked at Elena. "You," he said softly. "What do you think?" Everyone turned toward her. It wasn't an order. It was a test. The agent frowned slightly. Kessler watched with intense curiosity. Elena spoke carefully. "If someone wanted to destabilize you," she said calmly, "they would create simultaneous pressure points." She looked at the agent. "Legal threat," then at Kessler. "Financial visibility," then at Adrian. "And personal leverage." Silence. Even the guards were listening now. Elena continued, "You are being provoked into a mistake." The lawyer swallowed. The mistress whispered, "So what do we do?" Adrian's eyes never left Elena. "And what mistake would they expect?" he asked. She answered without hesitation, "A signature." The contract on the table felt radioactive. If signed now, it could be framed as reactionary asset shielding. If destroyed, it could look like obstruction. If left untouched, it became bait. Adrian's mind was calculating. Elena could see it. The agent crossed his arms. "So," he said, "are you going to sign it?" Adrian slowly picked up the pen. The entire cabin tensed. The mistress froze. The lawyer's face turned pale. Kessler watched like a chess player. Elena didn't breathe. Adrian held the pen above the paper. Then he set it down. "No," he said calmly. The tension snapped, but didn't disappear. He turned to the agent. "You arrived before the signature," Adrian said evenly. "So technically, no crime occurred mid-flight." The agent didn't deny it. Adrian then looked at Kessler. "And you arrived to observe." Kessler's expression remained neutral. "I arrived to warn." Adrian's gaze shifted to Elena again. "And you," he said quietly, "prevented a mistake." For the first time that night, there was no mockery in his tone, only recognition. The agent stepped forward slightly. "We will need to escort you for questioning." Adrian's expression hardened. "You can request." The agent met his stare. "We are requesting." A standoff. Then, Adrian surprised everyone. He nodded once. "Very well." The lawyer blinked. "You can't be serious." "I am." He turned to his guards. "Secure the aircraft. No one leaves." Then to the mistress, "You'll remain seated." She nodded shakily. Finally, he turned to Elena. "You're coming with me." The agent frowned. "She's staff." Adrian's voice dropped half a degree. She translated. "She's now involved." The agent studied her. "Do you want to come?" Elena understood the gravity of that question. If she declined, she remained small. If she accepted, she stepped into the center of the storm. She met Adrian's eyes, then the agent's. "Yes," she said calmly, "I'll come." And in that moment, she stopped being invisible. The moment Adrian stepped off the jet, the temperature shifted. Not physically, strategically. Black SUVs surrounded the aircraft in a half circle. Federal vehicles behind them. Airport security held at a distance, confused but compliant. This wasn't a takedown. It was choreography. Adrian walked down the stairs like he was descending into his own lobby. No cuffs, no force, just presence. Elena followed one step behind and slightly to the side, close enough to be included, far enough to avoid the appearance of allegiance. The lead agent matched Adrian's pace. "You understand this is voluntary questioning," he said. Adrian's expression didn't change. "Nothing involving me is voluntary," he replied calmly. They reached a secured transport vehicle. Kessler remained near the jet, speaking quietly into his phone. The mistress was being escorted separately. The lawyer looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Elena observed everything. Which vehicles were running engines, which guards were watching the perimeter instead of the center, which agent kept glancing at his watch. Timing mattered. They entered the transport SUV. Adrian sat opposite the lead agent. Elena sat beside Adrian. Deliberate positioning. The vehicle doors shut. Privacy. The engine started. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then the agent broke the silence. "You've been careful," he said evenly. "Too careful." Adrian leaned back. "That's not illegal." "No," the agent agreed, "but it attracts attention." Elena watched Adrian's hands. Relaxed, not defensive. He wasn't afraid of financial audits. He was thinking about Katerina. That was the pressure point. The agent continued. "Your wife was approached at 10:12 a.m. A man claiming to represent international compliance requested verification of several trusts." Adrian's eyes sharpened. "She refused," he said flatly. The agent paused. "Yes. A flicker of satisfaction crossed Adrian's face. Subtle, but Elena caught it. She asked for written credentials, the agent added. He left. Silence again. Elena finally spoke. Did you identify the man? The agent looked at her. Partial face capture, no match in our immediate database. That means he's either private sector, Elena said quietly, or deliberately unlisted. The agent studied her carefully. You have experience in this field? She kept her tone measured. I observe patterns. Adrian's voice cut in smoothly. She notices details others miss. The agent glanced between them. Interesting endorsement. The SUV slowed as it entered a secured government facility. Not downtown, not high profile. Discreet. They exited the vehicle and were guided inside. White walls, minimal signage, soundproof doors. Adrian was led into an interview room. Elena was stopped at the doorway. Wait here, an agent instructed. Adrian turned. She comes in. The lead agent hesitated. She's not under investigation. She translated, Adrian repeated calmly. She understands the document. A beat. Then the agent nodded. 5 minutes. They entered the room together. The door closed. Silence. A single metal table. 2 chairs. Camera in the corner. Adrian didn't sit immediately. He looked at Elena. You didn't have to come, he said. She met his gaze evenly. I didn't want to stay on the plane. A faint smile. Honest answer. He sat. She remained standing for a moment, then took the seat beside him instead of across. Subtle signal. Alignment without submission. The door opened again. The agent entered with a tablet. We'll keep this straightforward, he said. There are 3 elements we're examining. He raised one finger. Offshore transfer patterns. Second finger. Unauthorized aircraft rerouting. Third. External interference targeting your spouse. Adrian's expression remained composed. Proceed. The agent placed a still image on the table. Grainy. Airport security capture. A man in a dark coat approaching Katerina's building lobby earlier that morning. Elena leaned forward slightly. Adrian didn't. He studied the image without visible emotion. Enhance, he said quietly. The agent zoomed in. The man's face remained partially obscured, but the posture, the stance. Elena felt something shift. She had seen that walk before. Not tonight, earlier, on the runway. One of the private security officers near Kessler's SUV. Same tilt of the shoulders, same slight inward angle of the left foot. She didn't speak immediately. Adrian noticed. You see something, he said, not a question. She answered carefully. The man at your wife's building may have been present at the landing site. The agent frowned. That's not possible. We controlled the perimeter. Did you control private compliance contractors? Elena asked calmly. The room went quiet. The agent looked at her sharply. What are you implying? I'm implying, she said evenly, that someone embedded themselves within the response team. Adrian leaned back slowly. His eyes darkened. Kessler, he murmured. The agent shook his head. He cooperated. That doesn't mean he wasn't manipulated, Elena said. The silence thickened. Adrian turned fully toward her now. You're not cabin staff, he said quietly. It wasn't accusation, it was realization. She held his gaze. I never said I was only cabin staff. The door handle shifted outside. Voices in the hallway. Raised, urgent. The agent's phone buzzed. He glanced down. His expression changed. What is it? Adrian asked. The agent looked up slowly. Your wife's building just triggered a security lockdown. Adrian stood instantly. The chair scraped across the floor. What happened? The agent swallowed. Power outage. Communication lines cut. And the surveillance feed went dark. The air left the room. Because that wasn't financial pressure anymore. That was escalation.
Adrian's voice dropped to something lethal. "Get me out of this room."
The agent didn't argue. He stepped aside. Because whatever this had just become, it was bigger than a compliance interview. Adrian moved first. Not rushed, focused, controlled violence in motion. Elena followed without being told. The hallway outside the interview room buzzed with restrained urgency. Agents speaking into headsets, screens lighting up with partial feeds. "Status," the lead agent demanded. A younger officer turned, pale. "Penthouse tower lost power at 2142. Backup generators failed to engage. Internal comms dead. Security team unresponsive." Adrian's face went cold. Unresponsive how? No check-in, no signal. Elena's mind began mapping possibilities. Power outage alone was pressure. Comms cut was strategy. But security unresponsive? That was infiltration. "Get transport," Adrian said flatly. The agent hesitated. "You understand we can't just—" Adrian stepped closer. "Your people failed to secure the perimeter at the airfield." The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. "If my wife is touched because you underestimated this," Adrian continued calmly, "there will be no paperwork that fixes it." The agent held his stare, then nodded once. "Vehicle now." They moved fast. This time, no formal escort. A convoy formed within seconds. Federal SUV in front, Adrian's vehicle in the middle, 2 unmarked units behind. Elena slid into the back seat beside Adrian as the engine roared. City lights blurred past. He didn't look at her. His phone was in his hand. He dialed. No answer. He dialed again. Voicemail. He lowered the phone slowly. Not panic. Calculation. "Tell me," he said quietly, still looking ahead, "what kind of team cuts power and comms before making contact?" Elena answered without hesitation. "Not amateurs. And not thieves." He glanced at her now. "Explain." "If it were a kidnapping," she said, "they'd leave the lights on. Visibility is leverage." A beat. "If it were a hit," she continued, "they wouldn't bother isolating communication. It would already be done." Silence filled the car. "So?" he pressed. "So, this is containment." The word landed heavy. "Someone wants her isolated," Elena finished. The lead agent in the front seat glanced back. "Isolated for what?" Elena met his eyes in the rearview mirror. "To force a decision." Adrian's jaw tightened. The convoy turned sharply into a private access road. Katerina's building rose ahead, 40 stories of glass and steel. Dark, completely dark. No lobby lights, no illuminated floors, black against the skyline. Emergency vehicles blocked the front entrance. Security personnel stood outside, confused and unsettled. The convoy stopped. Adrian stepped out before the car fully halted. "Status," he demanded. A building supervisor approached nervously. "Total blackout, sir. Backup grid fried. We're trying to restore internal power." "What about the penthouse?" "No contact." Adrian moved toward the entrance. An agent grabbed his arm lightly. "We clear it first." Adrian's gaze dropped to the hand. The agent released immediately. 2 minutes, the agent said. Teams entered, weapons drawn. Elena stood beside Adrian near the lobby doors. The marble floors reflected only faint emergency lighting. Too quiet. Too still. "You're not afraid," Adrian said suddenly. It wasn't accusation, it was observation. "I am," she replied calmly. "But fear is data." He looked at her. "And what does it tell you now?" "That whoever did this expects you to react violently." A pause. "And?" "And that reaction is the real objective." His eyes narrowed. "You think this is still about the assets?" I think, she said evenly, someone wants you unstable enough to sign something worse than a contract. Before he could respond, the elevator doors opened. An agent stepped out. "Penthouse secured," he reported. "No visible breach." Adrian moved instantly. They entered the elevator. It ascended in near darkness, emergency lights flickering. 38th floor, 39th, 40th. The doors opened. The penthouse hallway was dim but intact. No broken glass, no forced entry. Adrian walked fast toward the double doors. They were closed, unmarked. He pushed them open. Inside, candles, dozens of them, lining the marble floors, casting long, wavering shadows across the walls. And at the center of the living room, Katerina Volkov stood perfectly still, 7 months pregnant, one hand resting gently on her stomach. Calm, unharmed. Adrian stopped. The entire room felt charged. "You're late," she said quietly. Her voice was composed, measured, not frightened. Elena stepped in behind him and immediately noticed something else. The candles weren't random. They were arranged in a pattern, a circle around the living area. Containment, intentional. The lead agent whispered, "What the hell?" Katerina's eyes shifted to Elena, sharp, assessing. "You brought her," she said. Not surprised, not curious, as if she had expected it. Adrian stepped forward. "What happened?" he asked. Katerina tilted her head slightly. "Someone cut the power." "Yes." "And then?" "They waited." "For what?" "For you." Silence. Elena's pulse slowed. Katerina wasn't the target. She was the trigger, and she knew it. Adrian took another step closer. "Who was here?" "No one entered," Katerina replied calmly. "They wanted me to feel alone." The candles flickered as a breeze moved through the room. Adrian's expression darkened. "And you're not afraid?" he asked. Katerina's lips curved slightly. "Should I be?" A long pause. Then she added, "I was never the weakness." The words hung between them, because now the pieces aligned. The fake compliance visit, the redirected jet, the federal timing, the blackout. This wasn't a random enemy. This was psychological warfare. And someone had underestimated one crucial thing. Katerina wasn't fragile. She was patient. Elena stepped forward slightly. "There's something else," she said quietly. All eyes turned to her. She pointed toward the candles. "They're arranged intentionally." Adrian looked down, and for the first time, he saw it. The circle wasn't perfect. There was a gap, directly aligned with the balcony doors, which were slightly open, cold air drifting in. The lead agent swore under his breath. Adrian moved fast. He crossed the room and stepped onto the balcony. The city sprawled below, empty. But on the adjacent rooftop, a red laser dot blinked once, then disappeared. Elena stepped beside him. "Not a shot," she said calmly. "A signal." Adrian's eyes darkened. "They're watching," he murmured. Behind them, Katerina remained perfectly still. Then she spoke again. "It's not me they're isolating," she said quietly. Adrian turned slowly. "What do you mean?" Her gaze moved past him, to Elena. "It's you." The room didn't move. It recalibrated. Katerina's gaze remained on Elena, steady, unblinking, analytical. Adrian followed that gaze slowly. "Explain," he said, not to his wife, to Elena. The city wind drifted through the open balcony doors, brushing the candle flames into nervous flickers. Elena stepped away from the edge and back into the room. "They never intended to breach," she said evenly. "They needed you here." Adrian's jaw tightened. "I'm here." "Yes," she replied calmly, "but not in control." The lead agent shifted uneasily. "We have perimeter security." "Outside," Elena cut in softly. "Not inside the psychology of the play." Katerina's lips curved faintly. "She understands," she said. Adrian's eyes darkened. "Understands what?" Katerina finally moved. She walked slowly across the marble floor, stepping between the candles without disturbing them. "They wanted you to choose," she said. "Sign the contract under pressure, or abandon the flight and look reactive." A pause. "Either way, they frame you." Adrian's breathing remained steady. "And isolating you?" he asked her. Katerina placed her hand over her stomach again. "They needed to confirm something." "What?" She looked directly at Elena now. "That you would bring her." Silence. Even the federal agents went still. Adrian's gaze snapped back to Elena. "You knew," he said quietly. It wasn't anger. It was realization forming in real time. Elena held his stare. "I suspected." "From what?" "The first cockpit flicker." She walked toward the dining table and gently adjusted one candle, revealing the slight misalignment more clearly. "They had inside access," she continued, "but not full override. That means partial collaboration." The lead agent stiffened. "Are you accusing—" "I'm describing," she replied calmly. "Kessler's private contractors, federal presence, airspace redirect, penthouse blackout, layered pressure, but no actual strike. Because this wasn't about removal. It was about observation." Adrian stepped closer to her. "You're saying this entire chain of events was to watch my response?" "Yes." "And why involve you?" Elena exhaled slowly. "Because I wasn't supposed to be significant." A beat. "I was supposed to translate, panic, and create friction." Katerina nodded slightly. "But you didn't," she said. "No." Adrian studied her carefully now. "You redirected the tension instead of amplifying it." "Yes." The room felt different. The candles no longer ominous, strategic. The lead agent spoke cautiously. "If this was a stress test, what were they measuring?" Elena answered without hesitation. "Whether Adrian Volkov makes impulsive decisions when family is threatened." Adrian's expression hardened. "And?" "You didn't sign." He didn't smile, but something in his posture shifted. Then Katerina said something that changed the room again. "They weren't testing him." Everyone looked at her. "They were testing me." Adrian turned sharply. "Why you?" Katerina's voice remained calm. "Because if I panic, if I request asset relocation, if I authorize trust movement, then they have grounds to escalate." Silence. The agent whispered, "Financial manipulation." Katerina nodded. "They needed me to feel alone long enough to act independently." She looked around at the candles. "They cut power, removed communication, created vulnerability." Then she looked at Adrian. "But they underestimated something." "What?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "I don't panic." A heavy pause settled. Elena's mind connected the final piece. "This wasn't about catching you in a crime," she said quietly. "It was about proving you're unstable." Adrian's eyes sharpened. "And if I had reacted violently?" The agent answered this time. "We would have justification to freeze accounts under emergency statute." The words landed like concrete. There it was. Not criminal prosecution, financial suffocation. Force him to make a mistake, then shut down the empire legally. Adrian stepped toward the balcony again. He looked across the skyline. Dark rooftops, distant city hum. "They're still watching," he murmured. Katerina approached him. "Good," she said softly. He turned. She continued. "If they're watching, then they'll see this." She reached for his hand, deliberately, in front of agents, in front of Elena. Not emotional, strategic. "We don't fracture," she said calmly. "We consolidate." The message was clear. No panic, no asset shift, no visible cracks. Elena watched carefully, because this wasn't reconciliation. This was alignment. And then, her phone vibrated. A notification she wasn't supposed to receive. She didn't check it immediately, but she felt it. An encrypted channel, dormant for 2 years, activated. Her heartbeat slowed. Adrian noticed. "You're distracted." She met his eyes. "There's one more layer," she said quietly. The agent frowned. "What now?" Elena finally pulled her phone from her pocket. A single message. Unknown sender. One line. Phase 2 begins. Katerina's gaze sharpened instantly. Adrian's face went completely still. "Show me," he said. Elena handed him the phone. He read it once, then again. The timestamp matched the blackout. Kessler's contractor involvement, the federal arrival, all orchestrated. But Phase 2? That meant Phase 1 had succeeded. The agent's radio crackled suddenly. "Sir, we've got a situation at the harbor." Adrian looked up slowly. "What kind of situation?" "Container terminal access breach. 3 cargo ships rerouted without authorization." Silence. Adrian's empire didn't rely on paper contracts. It relied on ports, shipping lanes, movement. The agent swallowed. "It looks like someone is using tonight's distraction to move something big." Elena's mind sharpened instantly. "They needed you grounded," she said quietly. Adrian's eyes locked onto hers. "To pull resources from the docks." Katerina nodded slowly. "They weren't isolating me," she said. "They were relocating you." And now the real play was visible. Financial suffocation hadn't worked, so they moved to logistics disruption, cut the ports, destabilize supply chains, trigger legal review. Adrian stepped away from the balcony. His calm returned, colder than before. "Get every available team to Terminal 9, he ordered. The agent hesitated. "That's outside our immediate—" "Then watch," Adrian said evenly. "Because whoever just moved those ships is not subtle." Elena's phone buzzed again. Another message. This time only 2 words. "You're visible." Her stomach tightened. Not fear. Recognition. She looked up slowly. Adrian saw it. "They know you're here," he said quietly. She nodded once. "Yes." And for the first time tonight, the danger shifted. It wasn't centered on Katerina. It wasn't centered on Adrian. It was recalculating around her. No one spoke for 3 full seconds. That was how long it took for the axis of the room to shift, from Adrian to Elena. The lead agent stepped closer. "What do you mean they know you're here?" Elena didn't look away from the message, because the phrasing mattered. "You're visible. Not you're exposed. Not we see you. Visible. Deliberate." "They expected me to stay background," she said calmly, translating, observing, non-essential. Adrian's voice dropped half a tone. "And now?" "Now I altered the pattern." Katerina moved closer, studying Elena not with suspicion, but calculation. "You prevented the signature," she said. "Yes." "You redirected the interview." "Yes." "You identified the contractor breach." "Yes." Silence. Then Katerina asked the question no one else had yet dared. "Who were you before you became cabin staff?" The air tightened. The federal agent looked between them carefully. Adrian didn't interrupt. He was watching her the way he had on the plane. Only now there was no amusement, only evaluation. Elena inhaled slowly. 2 years ago, the answer to that question would have been classified. Tonight, silence would be more dangerous. "I worked in strategic financial compliance," she said evenly. The agent stiffened slightly. "For who?" Elena held his gaze. "Not for you." Adrian's eyes sharpened. "Then for who?" "For the division that audits the auditors." The room went very still, because that meant something precise. Oversight above oversight. Internal investigations above federal visibility. Katerina's lips curved slightly. I thought so. Adrian didn't smile. You were embedded, he said quietly. Yes. In my operation? In the network that touches it. A pause. Why leave? Elena's expression didn't change. I didn't. The agent stepped back half a pace. You're telling me you're active? No, she said calmly. I'm telling you I was placed dormant. The words hung in the air. Dormant assets weren't accidents, they were contingency plans. Adrian absorbed that. You were never just serving drinks. No. And tonight? Tonight, someone activated Phase 2. The agent's radio crackled again. Terminal 9 update. 2 containers already offloaded. Manifest mismatch. We're pulling images. Adrian didn't look away from Elena. Phase 1 was pressure, he said slowly. Yes. Phase 2 is movement. Yes. And you're visible because I prevented Phase 1 from succeeding. Silence. Then Katerina said something that tightened the entire room. Which means Phase 3 adapts. The agent muttered under his breath. Jesus. Adrian's gaze didn't soften. It hardened. If they activated you, he said quietly, then they know your history. Yes. And your skill set. Yes. And your leverage. A beat. Yes. The wind outside picked up, pushing the balcony doors slightly wider. The candles flickered harder. The agent's phone buzzed again. He checked it, then looked up. Container scans show encrypted drives, not drugs, not weapons. Adrian's jaw tightened. What? Data cores. The room fell silent. Data cores meant information. Massive volumes, transported physically to avoid digital trace. Elena's mind moved fast. They're extracting something, she said quietly. From where? The agent asked. She looked at Adrian. From you. He didn't react outwardly, but the silence confirmed the truth. Someone had been inside his shipping network, not to plant, to pull. Katerina turned slowly toward him. What data was stored at Terminal 9? Adrian answered without hesitation. Legacy transaction logs. The agent frowned. Offshore movement? Yes. The implications settled like stone. Someone wasn't trying to freeze his assets. They were trying to steal proof. And if they obtained full transaction mapping, they wouldn't need to provoke a mistake. They'd already have it. Adrian stepped away from the balcony. His calm returned fully now, colder than before. Who activated you? He asked Elena. She shook her head slightly. I wasn't activated by them. Then by who? She met his eyes evenly. By the system that placed me. The agent's voice was tight. You're talking about internal shadow oversight. Yes. And they're letting this play out? Yes. Why? Elena's answer came quiet. Because if they intervene too early, they expose themselves. Katerina's eyes narrowed slightly. So you're here to observe? Yes. And now you're involved? Yes. A long pause. Then Adrian asked the question that mattered most. Are you here to dismantle me? The air felt razor thin. Elena held his gaze without flinching. No. Then why are you here? She didn't answer immediately, because the honest answer would change the dynamic completely. I was placed to determine whether you're a destabilizing force, she said finally. Silence. And? He pressed. You're not reckless. A pause. You're strategic. Katerina exhaled slowly. The agent looked almost unsettled. Adrian studied her like a chessboard. And now? He asked. Now someone else is destabilizing the system itself. Another radio crackle. Sir, third container gone. Transport vehicles unmarked. They knew exactly where to cut through. Adrian turned toward the agent. Can you intercept? We're trying. Elena stepped closer to the balcony again, scanning rooftops, patterns, angles. They were watching earlier. They were signaling, which meant they wanted visibility. A thought struck her. Turn the penthouse lights on, she said. The agent blinked. We're on generator. Turn them all on. Adrian didn't question it. Do it! Within seconds, backup power surged. The penthouse flooded with light. Bright, defiant, visible from across the skyline. Elena stepped onto the balcony fully now, city wind in her hair. She looked toward the rooftop where the red laser had blinked earlier. Nothing, but she knew. They were watching. And now she was deliberately visible. Adrian stepped beside her. You're signaling back, he said. Yes. What message? She didn't look at him. That I'm not hiding. A long pause. His voice lowered. And what does that trigger? She finally turned to face him. Phase 3? The agent's phone vibrated violently in his hand. He answered, listened. Then his face went pale. They just breached the federal evidence server. Silence. From where? Adrian asked calmly. The agent swallowed. From inside our own network. Elena's pulse slowed to ice. Phase 3 wasn't about Adrian anymore. It wasn't about Katerina. It wasn't even about the shipping logs. It was about control of oversight itself. Someone was attacking the regulators. Katerina's voice was steady. This is bigger than us. Adrian's eyes never left Elena. And now, he said quietly, you're no longer dormant. She nodded once. No. And in the distance, across the skyline, a single red laser blinked again. This time steady. Not a threat. A challenge. The red laser didn't move. It held steady across the skyline like a digital heartbeat. Elena didn't flinch. Neither did Adrian. Behind them, the federal agent lowered his phone slowly. They're inside our core archive, he said quietly. Live breach. Internal credentials. Katerina stepped closer to the balcony doors. Not stealing your data, she said softly to Adrian. No, Elena replied before he could. They're erasing it. Silence fell hard, because that changed everything. If they stole Volkov's transaction history, it was leverage. If they erased federal evidence, it was war. Adrian turned fully toward Elena now. You knew this was coming. Yes. How? Because destabilizing you wasn't enough. The agent swallowed. Explain. Elena stepped back inside, the city wind trailing behind her. They tried pressure, psychological manipulation, financial trigger points. She looked at the agent. When that didn't produce chaos, they escalated. Escalated how? He pressed. They're removing the referee. The room understood. If oversight systems collapsed, there would be no compliance enforcement, no audit trails, no leverage, just vacuum. And vacuum invited power shifts. Katerina's voice was calm. Someone wants the field empty. Adrian's eyes darkened. So they can rebuild it. Elena nodded once. Yes. The agent's radio crackled again. Sir, containment failing. Internal wipe spreading across 3 archive clusters. He cursed under his breath. They're destroying years of evidence. Elena's mind sharpened to a point. No, she said quietly. They're choosing what to destroy. Adrian studied her. Selective wipe? Yes. Meaning? They're preserving what benefits them. A pause. and erasing what implicates them. The silence that followed was heavier than before, because that meant infiltration had been deep, long-term, strategic, not a sudden coup. Katerina turned slowly toward Elena. "Who are they?" she asked. Elena held her gaze. Not a single entity. Adrian's jaw tightened. A coalition? Yes. Of what? Financial actors who operate above visible networks. The agent muttered, "You're talking about sovereign shadow funds." Elena didn't confirm verbally, but her silence did. Adrian stepped closer. "And what was my role in this?" "You were a stress test." He didn't blink. "For what?" "To see if you would fracture under coordinated pressure." "And if I had?" "They would have frozen you publicly while moving assets privately." Silence. The red laser blinked once, twice, then vanished. Elena's phone vibrated again. New message. One word. Respond. Adrian saw it over her shoulder. "Who is sending that?" She looked at him. "My former command." The agent stepped forward sharply. "You're in direct contact with them?" "No." "Then what does respond mean?" Elena's eyes moved toward the skyline again. "It means I'm being asked to choose." Katerina's voice was steady.
Choose what?
"Alignment." The room went still again. Adrian's tone dropped lower. "And your options?" Elena didn't hesitate. "I can re-enter oversight." The agent's eyes widened. "You can shut this breach down?" "Yes." "And the alternative?" Adrian asked quietly. "I stay neutral." A long silence stretched, because neutrality right now meant letting federal archives burn, letting evidence vanish, letting the coalition consolidate control. Adrian's voice was measured. "If you re-enter oversight, you're no longer background." "No." "You become visible permanently." "Yes." Katerina stepped closer to Elena now, not as rival, not as suspicion, as assessment. "And if you intervene," Katerina said softly, "you expose yourself to the same forces orchestrating this." "Yes." "And they won't hesitate to remove you." "No." The agent's voice cut in. "We don't have time. The wipe is accelerating." Elena closed her eyes for half a second, calculating risk, not fear, probability. Adrian stepped closer. "You're not obligated to us." "I know." "You're not obligated to the system." "I know." "So what are you obligated to?" he asked quietly. She opened her eyes. "To balance." The word hung there. Adrian studied her, then said something that shifted everything. "If you step back into that world," he said evenly, "you won't do it alone." The agent frowned. "You're offering cooperation?" Adrian didn't look at him. "I'm offering strategic alignment." Katerina nodded once. "Temporary." Elena looked between them. "You would work with oversight?" Adrian's answer came cold. "I would work against destabilization." The agent exhaled slowly. "This is bigger than individual networks." "Yes," Elena said, "and that's exactly why I was placed dormant in the first place." Another radio crackle. "Final cluster breach in 60 seconds." The room went silent again. Adrian looked at Elena. "No pressure." There was pressure, but not from him. She stepped toward the dining table, placed her phone down, unlocked it. A hidden interface surfaced beneath the messaging screen. Encrypted authentication panel. Dormant credentials. The agent stared. "You still have access." Elena's voice was steady. "I never lost it." She looked at Adrian one last time. "If I do this, you're no longer just under observation." "I understand." You'll be mapped completely. I already am. A beat. And Katerina? He didn't hesitate. She was never the weakness. Katerina's eyes softened for the first time that night. Elena turned back to the screen. A single prompt blinked. Reactivation authorization required. She hovered her thumb above it. Outside, the skyline felt charged. Inside, the federal server's evidence was vanishing. Inside the harbor, containers were moving. Inside this penthouse, alliances were shifting. The agent's voice came low. 10 seconds. Elena pressed her thumb down. The screen scanned. Confirmed. The interface shifted instantly. Live network mapping exploded across the display. Intrusion nodes, ghost credentials, shadow routes. The agent's phone buzzed violently. "Sir, the wipe just halted." Silence. "Repeat," he demanded. "Archive freeze in effect. Unknown countermeasure deployed." Adrian looked at Elena. She was already moving, typing, redirecting, severing access tunnels. The agent stared in disbelief. "You're inside their override." "Yes," she said calmly. "And now they know." On the skyline, 3 red laser dots appeared, not blinking, locked, targeting the balcony. Adrian stepped forward instinctively, but Elena didn't move. "They won't shoot," she said evenly. "How are you so sure?" the agent snapped. "Because this was never about killing." The lasers vanished. Her phone vibrated one final time. New message. "You chose." She read it, then looked up. "Yes," she whispered. "I did." The room didn't erupt. It stabilized. The federal agent's phone kept buzzing. Incoming confirmations, rapid-fire updates. "Archive clusters secured," a voice reported. "Intrusion nodes isolated. We're tracing origin." Elena didn't look up from the screen. "Don't trace outward," she said calmly. The agent froze. "Why not?" "Because they want you to." She rerouted a node manually, fingers precise, movements surgical. "If you counterhack aggressively, they pivot to false flags." Adrian stood beside her, watching, not interfering, not questioning, just observing how she moved inside a system he'd only ever seen from the outside. The screen displayed layered maps, access tunnels stitched across private banks, port authorities, federal audit mirrors. The breach hadn't been chaotic. It had been clean, professional. "You're not fighting criminals," Elena said quietly. "You're fighting architects." The agent swallowed. "Can you identify them?" "Yes." "Will you?" A pause. Elena's eyes flicked briefly to Adrian, then to Katerina, then back to the screen. "I can identify the coalition structure," she said, "but not expose it publicly." "Why not?" the agent demanded. "Because this wasn't an overthrow." Silence. "It was a stress simulation," she finished. Adrian's eyes sharpened. "For what?" he asked. Elena shut down one final node. The federal system confirmed full stabilization. "Testing the integrity of power structures under coordinated disruption." The agent blinked. "You're saying this was an evaluation?" "Yes." "By who?" She exhaled slowly. "The same oversight layer that placed me dormant." The air shifted again, because that meant something uncomfortable. This wasn't rogue infiltration, it was sanctioned pressure. Katerina stepped forward slowly. "So this entire night," she said quietly, "was an assessment?" Elena nodded once. "Yes." "Of him?" Adrian asked. "Of the network." The agent stared at her. "You allowed federal evidence to be at risk?" "It was never truly at risk," she replied calmly. The room went still. "Phase 1 tested financial impulsivity," Elena continued. "Phase 2 tested operational reaction. Phase 3 tested oversight resilience. She finally put the phone down. And all three held. Silence pressed into the marble floor. Adrian's voice dropped to something dangerously quiet. You knew. I suspected. And you intervened anyway? Yes. Why? Elena met his gaze evenly. Because the evaluation was tipping into destabilization. Katerina studied her carefully. So you protected the system? Yes. And him? Katerina asked. A pause. I prevented escalation. Not the same answer. Adrian noticed. A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. You don't lie, he said. No. The federal agent's phone vibrated again, this time slower, measured. He answered, listened, then slowly lowered it. It's over, he said. External nodes disengaged, no further intrusion. Elena nodded once. They have what they needed. And what was that? Adrian asked. She looked at him steadily. Proof you don't fracture. The words hung between them. Because that was the truth. He hadn't signed under pressure. He hadn't lashed out at federal presence. He hadn't moved assets impulsively. He hadn't exposed Katerina publicly. He had remained controlled, strategic, predictable in restraint. Which meant something critical. He was not a destabilizing variable. Katerina's voice was soft now. So what happens to us? Elena answered honestly. You remain under observation. Adrian didn't react. I assumed that. And you? He asked her. What happens to you? She looked at the skyline one last time. The red lasers were gone, the rooftops dark, the air still. I'm no longer dormant, she said quietly. The agent shifted. Are you rejoining oversight formally? Yes. And leaving this? Adrian asked. Yes. A beat. But our paths intersected for a reason. He studied her. Strategic alignment, he murmured. Temporary, she replied. Katerina stepped forward. For the first time, there was something almost human in her expression. Thank you, she said simply. Elena inclined her head slightly. You didn't panic, she said to Katerina. I never do, Katerina replied. A quiet understanding passed between them. Two women misjudged by proximity to power, in different ways. The federal team began withdrawing, systems stabilized, the harbor issue contained. The penthouse lights glowed bright against the skyline. Adrian stepped closer to Elena one final time. If they test me again, he said quietly, will you be watching? Yes. And if I fail? She held his gaze. Then I won't stop the fall. No threat, just truth. He nodded once. Fair. Elena picked up her phone. The encrypted interface had already sealed. Her credentials reactivated permanently. She walked toward the elevator. Not hurried, not dramatic. At the doorway, Adrian spoke once more. Elena. She turned. You were never just visible, he said calmly. You were decisive. A pause. And that's rarer. She gave him the faintest smile. Control is rarer. The elevator doors closed, descending. The penthouse remained lit above the city like a signal. Inside, Adrian and Katerina stood side by side on the balcony. Not shaken, not broken. Observed, tested, confirmed. And somewhere beyond the skyline, behind layers of financial institutions and oversight systems, a quiet report was finalized. Subject, Volkov. Network status. Stable under coordinated stress. Risk of destabilization, contained. Embedded asset, reactivated. The game hadn't ended. It had simply moved to a higher board. And this time, everyone knew Elena Morales was no longer invisible. The end.